Welcome to Echoes of Anne, Youthful Voices, a podcast by the U.S. Anne Frank Youth Network. Today I'll be chatting with Chandler about the January theme, identity. Chandler, would you start by introducing yourself?
Hello everyone, my name is Chandler Lawton. I'm a freshman sport and entertainment management major here at the University of South Carolina, and I've been working with the Anne Frank Youth Network since I was in the 7th grade. So I actually got started, I was a docent at my local middle school, and ever since then it's just been history. I was blessed to be able to be their student of the year last year. So ever since then I've just been working with them, and right now I currently serve as their student engagement coordinator, and I work with Emily on the social media here.
Nice. So my first question is, what does identity mean to you?
I think identity is one of those things that is constantly changing. I think that as you get older, as you develop, as your mindset changes, I think it's one of those things where it's like it grows with you. But I think ultimately understanding who you are as a person, to me, is what identity means. I think no matter what the outside world may think, what people around you may think, I think it's just really standing firm on your beliefs and who you are as a person that makes you and makes your identity.
That's a really beautiful answer. How do you think that your identity has shaped your involvement in the youth network?
I think the youth network actually helped me find my identity. I started giving tours and I was extremely shy. I remember my history teacher was like, okay, to me and my best friend, she was like, do you guys just want to be tour guides? And I was like, sure, why not? And I think that after that, it kind of helped me blossom into my show. I didn't say I consistent with it through high school, but I think that it showed through student council. I've always just had that giving back nature, and I think that I really can aid that to the youth network, because I think they just really taught me that, hey, if there's something that you're passionate about, it's important that you go out and do the work that you need to do in order to continue that passion. And I think that since then, the youth network has helped me find my identity and find what's really passionate to me and how I can help others around me.
I love that understanding of the youth network as an outlet to showcase that part of your identity. So my next question has to do with intersectionality. More and more people are using intersectionality as a framework for understanding how different aspects of identity influence each other, or different identities interact. Do you feel that understanding your identity through the lens of intersectionality impacts how you understand yourself?
I think definitely. I think when we talk about intersectionality, I think it just proves the point that you can be one person and have multiple identities. I think being a Black woman, obviously there's multiple identities within myself, and I think it ultimately plays a role in the way that I interact with myself and the way that I interact with others. And I think a really beautiful example of that is Anne Frank herself. I think we look at it, she was Jewish and she was German, and I think that one of her identities was taken, and in a way it was obviously overpowered more than the other one. Obviously, when you look at history, all we saw was the Jewish aspect of her. We didn't see the fact that she was also German. And I think that it's important to, obviously sometimes your identity is way more than the other, but I think it's important to focus on all of them, because I think at the end of the day, they are your identities for a reason. And I think that they ultimately shape who you are as a person. So I think it's really important to continue to look at intersectionality and just bring awareness to the idea that you can be more than one identity, and it's okay to have more than one identity.
I think that's a really great tie-in with Anne Frank, and that she was both German and Jewish. And I kind of think it's interesting to think about the fact that she probably would have also seen herself as Dutch. And so even within sections of identities, you can, you're not necessarily tied down to one. How do you feel that your identity has changed over time, if you think that it has?
I think my identity has definitely changed over time. And I think, I don't know, when I answer that question, I think sometimes you expect this long drawn out answer about how I've just grown as a person. And I think I have definitely grown as a person, but I think my identity has changed in the way that I honestly committed to my parents, because I look at my mom and my dad and they are polar opposites. And I grow up and I'm like, wow, I act a lot like my dad in this way, or I act a lot like my mom in that way. And I think that it's shaped my identity in the way that I take the good and bad out of both of them. And I've learned that, okay, maybe this is one thing that maybe my dad can work on, but I noticed that I have that too. So how am I going to work on it within myself? So taking that and growing with it. And I think that my identity has just evolved with me as a person. I think that every day I learn something new, and every day I learn something new about myself. And I think coming to college, I've learned a lot about myself. I think I was really, really hard on myself in middle school and high school, and just comparing myself to others a lot. And I think I got to college and I'm like, okay, you can stand on your own 2 feet. Like, like you've been raised well. I think that I'm a very perfectionist when it comes to certain things. And I think that my personality and the way that I carry myself is one of those things. And I think that I've gotten to college and it's like, okay, like I've put in the work to be who I am as a person. And I think I'm finally starting to see like, hey, like the work that you put in is actually paying off because the person that you talked about being or that you've worked towards being, you're actually becoming.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. And I feel like I've seen the same things in myself of like I would not identify with middle school Emily. Um, but yeah, I think that's a really like beautiful.
I think even like looking at friendships, like obviously now being a freshman in college, like I still am friends with my friends from high school and I look at it and I'm like, wow, like love you, but I don't understand how we were friends at one point because it's like we are polar opposites. And I think that being in college and being isolated from what I was so used to, it really exposed me to who I truly was as a person. And I think that I'm just glad that the person that I am now, it's a positive version of me. Obviously, you go through those ups and downs in life, but I'm just glad that I'm at a point now where it's like, okay, like I'm proud of the work that I put in and I'm proud of the person that I am.
Yeah, that's really great. And like I do think it's interesting how much we're shaped by like the circumstances that we're in that moment. Yeah. My next question is, do you feel that the maintenance of your identity or like your self-concept is influenced by outside factors like social media? And like, if so, how?
I would say social media, I would say it definitely does influence my identity on myself, but not in a bad way. I think that the most influence on my identity has definitely been my faith, especially coming to college. Like, I think that I've learned a lot about myself through my faith, and I think that I've learned to lean on that. And I think in the past, like I've seen things on social media, obviously being young, you go down that rabbit hole of comparing yourself to others, and you see the glamorous life, and it's like, well, dang, like that's not what my life is. And I think that I've just learned to be grateful for what I have in the moment and be grateful for living in the moment and just being able to feel and experience everything. So I think in a way, my faith has helped me to do that. But I think looking on social media now, like I just see things from a different perspective. Like I think even the good and the bad in the world, it's easy to be like, okay, well, this person's horrible. Or I think now I look at it and it's like, okay, like that may be horrible, but like, what is this person going through? And I think in a way, it's just shaped the way I look at things. I think that's the only thing that I hope that others can also see is that social media obviously has those bad things, but I think in the works it also can be a great thing and a great outlet to help a lot of people.
What do you think is the most important thing for young people to understand about their identity, especially in a world that's always changing? And I mean, we can also just think about like since Anne Frank's been alive, like it's been relatively not that long, but it's such a different world than what she lived in.
Yeah. No, I think my advice to younger people trying to find their identity is that I think that it's okay to change. And I think being open to that change. Like you said, the world is constantly evolving, and as the world evolves, we evolve with it. So I think that being able to say, okay, maybe on this day, this is how I felt about myself, and then the next day you have this realization, it's like, okay, like that's not who I am. And I think that's honestly healthy because I think being self-aware is so important. And I think that when you have that self-awareness, it's a lot easier to navigate life because ultimately you know who you are as a person. And I think when you know who you are as a person, it's a lot harder for outside sources to impact how you see yourself. So I think I would just tell them to be okay with change. You know, it's not always easy, but just roll with the punches. And I think at the end of the day, everything is always working for our good. So just always remember that. And at the end of the day, everything will pan out the way it needs to.
If you could give one piece of advice to your younger self about identity and self-discovery, what would it be?
I think if I could give one piece of advice to my younger self about identity, it would definitely be, I think, to not take everything so seriously. I think growing up, I was like, okay, like even, well, obviously socially and academically, like academically, oh my gosh, I got one B on my test, like I'm a horrible person, like literally I'm never going anywhere with life. And I think that getting out of that mindset and truly just living life to the fullest and just taking every day as it comes, I think that's been the best tip for my identity. I think oftentimes people tell me, like, even with friendships, relationships, like, I don't think, not everything's meant to be in your life forever, and I think not everything is meant to remain the same. So I think being able to adjust to that change has been the biggest thing in my identity, because I've seen myself be so bogged down or be so consumed in one person or one thing to the fact that, like, it, like, in a way shapes who I am as a person. And I think being 19, I think that's one thing that definitely people, whether it be like a relationship or friendships, I think it's really easy to be caught up in someone else and be caught up in who someone else is and how that affects you. And I think it's really important to not focus on that so much, because I think that at the end of the day, building yourself up is the most important thing, to the point where someone else should not be able to impact that or alter how you see yourself.
So kind of on the same train of thought as advice to younger people, what resources would you recommend if someone is on a journey of self-discovery or something of the sort, where they don't feel like they have their identity really defined and they are trying to figure out what that looks like for them?
Okay. I think there's two different paths that I would say take both. I think that I've definitely gone down. One of them, I think, is just being able to embrace the unknown. I think sometimes we think that we must have it all figured out and everything needs to be perfect and everything needs to be planned out. But I think sometimes some of the best self-discovery comes when you're genuinely just sitting there and you're like, okay, like, who am I as a person? Who do I want to be as a person? And I think being able to look at the good and bad in yourself. I think that as I've grown, I've looked at myself and I'm like, wow, this is really a trait that, like, maybe is not the best for me. And I think sometimes it can be hard to confront, because obviously you never want to think that, like, you have, I mean, you'll have flaws. So, like, sometimes it's hard to confront those flaws in others. But I think that being able to look at them and say, like, hey, like, this is how I want to change, or this is how I want to grow, and these are great things about me that I want to keep the same, or I want to potentially inspire others to take part in. I think that's just a really important way, is just being able to sit and think and reflect and just be okay with evolving and changing. And I think another way that I would say is finding things that you're passionate about. I think that if you would have told me when I was 13 that, like, I would be so passionate about working with the Anthem Youth Network and so passionate about what I do, I would have told you were crazy. So I think sometimes being able to find these outlets allows you to see, like, your own identity. Like, in a way, like, I feel like sometimes I can resonate with Anne with a lot of things, and I think that I would have never been so passionate about what I'm doing if I wasn't able to resonate with her. So I think her story, in a way, really shaped my story, and I think that's just a way for me to be so passionate about it. So I think that finding that story, that person, that thing that really inspires you and you see a lot of yourself in, and allowing that to kind of guide you and take you in places that you never would see, or potentially have opportunities that you wouldn't have before.
That's a really great answer. And I really relate to the needing to embrace the unknown, or embrace like your flaws and like things that you are kind of embarrassed about, to really understand yourself better. So next, I was hoping that you could talk a little bit about identity and like how we don't always understand ourselves the same way that other people do. So from Anne's diary, we can very clearly see a distinct version of Anne that is, as is understood by everyone else living in the annex, compared to how she saw herself and how she thought of herself. So could you talk a little bit about like what those differences are like? And yeah,
I think that I can definitely resonate with Anne also with that, in that sense. I think that as I've grown up, my personality has just really blossomed, and I'm so grateful for that. But sometimes I think that even my family, they're growing with me, but I think that sometimes it's a shocker to them. They're like, oh my gosh, this is like not my same sweet old 13-year-old that was living in the house with me. And I think that it's just really honestly been beautiful to see myself grow, and then see my parents see me grow. Because I think sometimes, like, I have a younger brother who's 4 years younger than me, and I think that people say, like, you don't realize how fast time is moving until you have kids. Obviously, he's not my kid, but like, I feel like sometimes I treat him like he is. But like, I think that you really see so much growth in your children, and I think watching my brother Brayden is, I honestly shape my identity based off of him. Sometimes I'm like, okay, like, you act just like me, and I feel like, I'm like, there's some things that maybe you shouldn't be doing, but I'm like, hey, you got it from me. So I have to look at myself and be like, wow, like, again, stop doing that, because Brayden is picking up on that. So I think that honestly, like, our parents, people around us play such a big role in shaping our identity. I think even on the flip side, like, with potentially like hurting your identity, but like, sometimes I think when I was in middle school, like, I would hear people say things about me, or like, even in high school, like, even things now, honestly, like, people say things and think things about me, and I'm like, that's not who I am as a person. But truly, it took me a long time to be able to be like, hey, like, you think that, and that's okay, but like that's not who I am as a person. And I think in the past, like I would hear these things and I would ponder on them, and I'm like, well, maybe I am that, and I'm like, well, no, I'm not that. So I think that that's another thing that I've really been proud of with my growth, is being able to build up myself and understand myself so well, and understanding my identity so well, to the point that anything anyone else says doesn't really necessarily shape how I feel about myself, because obviously I've worked to build this up, so therefore no one really can take it away. Obviously, that's different than being able to take criticism. I understand taking criticism, but I think sometimes it's just really important to stand firm in your morals and what you believe you are as a person.
Yeah, I think everyone sees like little glimpses of you, and you are the only person who really can like see yourself as a whole.
Yes.
And so I think it's fascinating to hear what other people have to say
Yes.
about you and what they've gleaned about you, but that's not your full story.
Where did you get that from? Where did that come from? Like, I would never thought about that. But then sometimes, like, it's just like great things. And it's like, oh, like I love to hear that. Like in high school, I did a lot with student council, like I said before, and I think that honestly also really shaped my identity, because I'm like, okay, like I've never really seen myself as a very like maternal figure. And then I think part of my job for state president was we had to run a summer camp with kids, and I'm like, okay, like this is never something that like I've done. This is out of my comfort zone, and I think coming out of it, like I absolutely loved it, and I was like, wow, this is something that I think that I was really meant to do and really meant to help with. So I think that sometimes our identity leads us in places that we would have never thought we would be, and I think that ultimately that just proves how important identity is, because it really guides you to what you are passionate about and who you are.
Yeah, that is a beautiful ending of this. So today I got the chance to chat with Chandler, and we talked about identity. So if you want to hear more about our identity theme and keep up with that, check out our Instagram, us.AnneFrank Youth Network, and we'll have more coming.